Now we want to look at the foundational habit. Habit 1, to be proactive. Why foundational? Because all of the other habits flow out of it. If habit 1 is present, you can cultivate the other 6. If it is not present, you will not cultivate the other 6. Habit 1, be proactive, basically means that your life is a product of your values, not your feelings. That your life, or the organization's life, is a product of your decisions, not your conditions. The opposite of being proactive is to be reactive, which basically means that your life is a function of your feelings, your moods, your impulses, other people's treatment. The underlying principle of habit 1, be proactive, is to take responsibility. The concept is you and I have the capacity to choose our response. If you don't believe that you're capable of choosing your own response, if you don't have that vision of yourself, if you're deep into victimism, I'll just about guarantee you will become disempowered. You will not begin with the end in mind, with careful thinking about the future. You'll be a function of the past. You will put second, third, fourth, and fifth things first, with your ladder leaning against the wrong wall. You'll think win-lose or lose-win. You'll always seek to be understood first rather than to understand. And you'll be constantly botching all kinds of relationships because both parties feel misunderstood. Ego battles will develop. At best, you'll end up with compromise instead of synergy. And you will not take the time to sharpen the saw because you simply don't have the time to get gas. You're too busy. You're buried in the thick of thin things. That's why habit 1 is so foundational, so basic. It is the vital, foundational component of every other habit. Again, let's define it as the capacity, the desire to subordinate impulses, moods, feelings, conditions to values based on principles. To subordinate. Until little by little our emotional life, which was once like this, gets ironed out. You still may have some ups and downs emotionally, but there is a steadiness, a constancy in your nature to where you can make and keep promises to yourself and to others. Where you can treat others with kindness without capitulating your convictions. In short, to where you can begin to practice the other habits which build on top of it. How many here feel better when the weather outside is great? There's physiological reasons for that. Endorphins are released, chemical substances inside the mind, through sunlight. How many do better when you feel better? That means we're reactive to the physical culture. If you were proactive, you would carry your weather within you, regardless of the physical culture. And through exuding positive energy and smiling, you also release endorphins. What about the social culture? How many feel better when you're treated better? How many do better when you feel better? That's being reactive to the social weather, the social culture. What if you could learn to carry your social weather inside so that you can be consistent in extremely difficult, adverse situations, in pursuing worthy purposes and living by natural laws or principles? That's what it means to be proactive. We're tested every day in 1,000 little ways, in the ordinary things. And if we are proactive in those things, it gradually develops extraordinary capability in handling major setbacks or disappointments. But oftentimes, we look into the more spectacular, the more dramatic, the larger issues to see the obvious energy of proactivity, of habit one. For instance, Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist, imprisoned in the death camps of Nazi Germany because he was a Jew, experienced unbelievable indignities and tortures. He was raised in the Freudian tradition that you're basically a product of your childhood. He worked on that assumption, that paradigm. But while he was in the death camps, he began to observe some very interesting things. Some people were animals, others were saints, with the same circumstances. He himself experienced terrible things. Some of his own loved ones were cremated. He expected the same fate. For some reason, they saved him for experimental purposes. One day, they stripped him naked, put him under white light, and began to perform those ignoble sterilization experiments upon his body. And he discovered what he called the last human freedom. The power to choose my response to any condition, to anything that happens to me. He called the last human freedom. And he cultivated a sense of meaning, so that he saw himself in his imagination lecturing to his students in Austria following his release from the death camp about the very experiences he was having at the time, about the insights, the learnings he was acquiring. And he came to postulate that the highest value at all is the power to choose your attitude in situations over which you have no control. That was the last human freedom. Do you want to see evidence of that? How many of you have ever had a loved one, a dear friend, family member, go through a terminal illness with a magnificent attitude? How many have experienced that? Now look at the hands, look at the number. How many of you were enormously inspired by such modeling? Same hands. I just saw that with my sister, Marilyn, who just recently passed away. The night before she died, she told me, my only desire is to teach my children and my grandchildren how to die with dignity and with a desire to contribute and to live life nobly and based on principles. And the cancer inside her lungs was like a tree growing up. But her whole focus during the months, even years that preceded this, was constant teaching. Those children and grandchildren and friends and loved ones will be inspired and ennobled by such modeling, such mentoring the rest of their lives. Between what happens to us, the stimulus, whatever has happened to us, or what is now happening to us, between that stimulus and our response is a space. In that space lies our power and our freedom to choose our response. In these choices lie our growth and our happiness. In other words, with the right choices, eventually the response we choose begins to influence the stimulus. This is what Viktor Frankl discovered. And through exercising his memory, that is his self-awareness, and his imagination, and his conscience, by asking questions such as, what is this situation asking of me, instead of, what do I ask of it? Why are they doing this to me? And also by exercising his own independent will, this freedom became larger and larger until it was larger than his Nazi captors. Not his liberty. Liberty is a condition of the environment. Liberty is a condition of the externals. Freedom is a condition of the person, of the internals. We have control over our freedom, not in the short run over our liberty. However, in many situations, not necessarily all, the more you control your freedom and expand and deepen it, eventually you will influence the liberty of your life, the options, the alternatives that are available to you. Eventually, your head will create your world. Your response to the stimulus will eventually influence the stimulus. And to some degree, he experienced that. He also had the hypothesis, or tried to look at the hypothesis. What enables these people in the death camps to survive? Is it their survival skills? No. Is it their intelligence? No. Is it their health? No. Those things were eventually equalized, lost. Helped a little initially, but eventually they were gone. Is it their family structure? No. The thing that enabled survival was a vision of the future, a sense of meaning about a work yet to do, a contribution yet to make. And this became the basis for his brilliant autobiographical account of these experiences called Man's Search for Meaning. Even a friend of his was so miserable he wanted to commit suicide, and Frankl pressed him, "Why don't you?" He said, "Because if I predeceased my wife, it would make her so unhappy and miserable, and I love her so." That alone gave him meaning to survive. And he would constantly ask the question, what is life asking of you in this situation? Don't let the things you can do nothing about interfere with the things you can do a great deal about. One time, my brother and I were going down a canyon road with a cousin. He was chopping wood, had this axe. There was a rattler. He started chasing it. He started chopping at it. Eventually cut it in two. The front bit him right here, at the crook between the forefinger and the thumb. So many ways he could have responded. He could have chased that poisonous snake and driven the poison to the heart. He was smart, quick, proactive, subordinated feelings to values, got the blood out as fast as he could. Many people get hurt by someone. It does hurt them. But the real injury is going after the person, going after the snake. That's what drives the poison to the heart. It's not what people do to us that hurts us in the most fundamental sense. It's our chosen response to what they do to us that hurts us. Reactive people want to get back. They want to get even. They gather people around them that massage their heart and validate them and give them additional evidence to justify them and to condemn someone else out there who has done this injury. A lot of people gather together daily and confess the sins of their bosses. It becomes the fabric, the content of the coffee break and the lunch. Highly reactive. Proactive people learn to get the poison out and to move on. To forgive, to forget. Resentment means to live it again and again and again, and to fester, feed upon it. The net effect is to get filled with negative energy, to polarize, to seek self-justification, to look for data. That which we want to believe can easily be supported by data. The way you interpret data, as Eleanor Roosevelt put it, nothing can make you feel inferior without your consent. As Gandhi put it, no one can take away your respect unless you give it to him. Proactive people who act on the basis of their values, their purposes, their vision, don't give their power away, their freedom, their power to choose, to other people's weaknesses. We simply must never build our emotional life around the weaknesses of other people. Otherwise, we disempower ourselves and empower their weaknesses to continue to mess our life up. This is heavy-duty stuff, particularly for people that have had years and years of explaining away their misery in the name of somebody else. One time, a woman stood up in the middle of a group like this and started to give a speech on her own, spontaneously. And then she sensed the inappropriateness of that, grew a little embarrassed and sat back down, but she could not restrain herself from talking to everyone around her. She was just filled with some kind of explosive learning or excitement. And she had positive energy. You could see it in her eyes, in her gestures, her body language. I could hardly wait to the break to get up to her. What happened to you? Oh, you have no idea what that principle, that habit of being proactive means to me. I'm the full-time nurse to the most miserable, ungrateful character you can imagine. He doesn't even acknowledge me, let alone show any form of appreciation. The other full-time nurses feel just like I do. We almost sit around and talk about his demise. Hope for it, wish for it, while we're taking care of him. And for you to have the gall to suggest that I chose to be miserable? Come on. I didn't choose it. He made me. But then I realized how dependent I am, how I've given my power to his miserable behavior. She said, as soon as I swallowed that big, thick, bitter pill, and it hit, and I realized, wait a minute, if I chose to be miserable, I can choose otherwise. She said, I was let out of prison. I was liberated. That's when I stood up. I wanted to talk to everyone. I wanted to proclaim my freedom. I could not contain myself. I just can't tell you what that means. Between what happens to us, the stimulus, and our response to the stimulus lies our freedom. All our behavior and our actions flow from our paradigm. Deterministic psychology tends to break out into three areas, three fields. Genetic determinism, psychic determinism, environmental determinism. Genetic determinism basically means your grandparents did it to you. Yeah, I have a short fuse. It just seems to go through generations. My father has one, and his father. Yeah, I'm a night person. The whole family is. Don't talk to me in the morning, I'm not pleasant. This has come to the generations. You see, what if I had a predisposition because of my genetic makeup? Okay? That is the stimulus. Between that and our response to it is our freedom to choose our response. So what would we do? We'd adopt a lifestyle so that it didn't activate that genetic tendency, so that our lives were not made dysfunctional from it. Now, this isn't to say that we are not genetically powerfully influenced. It is to say that we are not genetically determined. And the difference between being influenced by and determined by is 180 degrees. Psychic determinism means your parents